Hi, and welcome to GCs in the House, a podcast spotlighting general counsels. I'm your host, Lena Guo. In my conversations with GCs, we discuss how they got in the top legal seat, obstacles that they had to overcome along the way, and how they are tackling new challenges. This is the third episode of the Women General Counsel series. Today, I am speaking with Chen, Executive Vice President and General Counsel of Infoblox, a cloud-based networking and security company that is based in Santa Clara, California. Received her Bachelor of Law and Master of Law while in China. She then immigrated to the U.S., earning a master's in sociology from the University of Delaware, and then her JD from the University of Illinois. After practicing as a corporate attorney at Skadden and Cooley, began her in-house journey at Sun Microsystems. Was with Salesforce for over 12 years before she became general counsel of Infoblox. Talked about how she started her career just following the herd, how her time at Salesforce gave her the opportunity to gain the leadership skills that she didn't think she needed, how she has been leveraging AI to be a more effective attorney, and the importance of continuing to learn and having a positive contribution to the world around us. Here's my conversation with Wei.
Hi, Wei. Thank you so much for being a guest on my podcast. I'm excited to chat with you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Lena. Thanks so much for inviting me.
Great. And, I thought you would be such a perfect guest for the podcast because of your really unique background and experience. I think you are a total badass. And I just want listeners to hear everything that, all the obstacles that you've had to overcome to become a general counsel. So to start, please tell us who you are and your current role, and tell us a little bit about your company.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Chen, and I'm the general counsel of Infoblox. Infoblox is a leader in the domain name system management and security. We're trying to unite the networking industry and the security industry. It is a portfolio company of two private equity firms, Vista and Warburg. I'm actually a first-time GC, so I joined Infoblox over a year ago. So far, I have to say it's been a very rewarding experience.
Great, thank you. And to start from the beginning, you've got degrees in spades. Tell us how they all came about and what led you down the path of law.
Yeah, and then for any people who know me, that I'm honest to a fault. So thanks so much for noticing that. I was definitely the last person to get a job in my college class, and everybody was making fun of me. Finally, graduated. So I have to say that I got this question a lot, right? About why you want to study law, why you wanted to be a lawyer. I have to say, I just have to be honest with you. The reason why I got into law is because when I applied for college, I grew up in a small town, small city in China. And there's limited space for us to apply to these prestigious colleges. So the only two majors that was available to me at that point, for this particular college I wanted to go to, one is Chinese literature, the other is law. And that makes the choice very easy for me. I grew up in China. This was before internet, before people in my circle actually got the opportunity to see around the world. So, I had this dream of becoming an office girl with a white shirt and a pencil skirt. And that was pretty much it, right? The rest of it is really just about following the herd going to the best schools. Where is everybody else going? Like getting the highest paying job. Everybody is going to the U.S. and maybe that's something that I should do too. So that pretty much led to all these collection of degrees, because I just felt like, hey, everybody is going to the US, maybe I should go there too. And then once I get to the US, I get one degree, and then I couldn't find a job, I have to get another degree, and that's why I started collecting all these degrees.
And I mean, you are an immigrant. There were no lawyers in your family, and you ended up graduating and starting out at Skadden. So how did that end up? How did you end up at Skadden? And then, of course, you had really solid law firm training early in your career. So tell us about your practice.
Yeah. So it was because I test well. Like I always score really high on my tests. So that's how I got into Skadden, and because I have really high GPAs in law school. And my first couple of years being a corporate attorney at Skadden, it's your bread and butter being a corporate attorney, doing public securities work, corporate governance work, and M&A. So that's just how I get started. I know all of this sounds like, oh, why is Wei here on this podcast, right? She is just like, but I promise you, keep listening. Like things get better from here.
Well, you already have a really great story, especially given that English wasn't your first language and you were able to get into one of the top law firms in the country or in the world. So at what point did you know that you wanted to go in-house?
The first 40 years of my life is pretty much like following the herd, right? Go to the best schools, go to the best college, and go to the best jobs, and go to the best country. Not much thought has been given to exactly what I want to do and why I want to do it. So the reason why I went in-house is because during my maternity leave for my second daughter, a recruiter called, and my mom was here, and my mom basically said, hey, maybe now is a good time for you to spend more time with my family, because my first daughter, Lena, I know you're a young mother as well. It's very tough to be a attorney working in a big law firm and be a good mother, right? So I had my firstborn essentially crying if she saw me being the first one who got home, because she wasn't used to it. So that was a pretty disheartening experience, right? For me. So at that point, the recruiter called, and I was like, okay, maybe now it's a good time to have a more work-life balance.
Yeah, there are so many thoughts on that. I mean, it's really hard to stay in the game, as you mentioned, as a big law associate and with a young child. And I've seen so many people make that transition in-house, especially during the time that you did, when I think practicing in-house there was a bit more of a work-life balance than there is now. And so you ended up at Sun Microsystems. That was your first in-house position, right?
Yep. And I have to say, for those people who have illusion of being an in-house counsel has like more work-life balance, I agree with that. But I think, nowadays I actually work longer hours than how much I work, when in the law firm. But it didn't feel a chore at all. I come into work every day filled with joy and filled with purpose and filled with mission. It's just a completely different game now.
Mm-hmm. And was that also part of was that why you made the transition to Salesforce too? Just kind of the excitement and being part of a company that was just kind of on the up and up?
Again, no. The reason why I started looking was because Sun Microsystems at that point was being acquired, right? And being the in-house M&A legal counsel, the message on the wall was pretty clear that you probably won't get a job. after the deal closes, and that's when I started looking. And then there's this little company, in San Francisco, which I never heard of, called Salesforce, and I was like, okay, I probably will just go there for like 2 years, and then I'll come back to the South Bay because everything, in technology is happening in Palo Alto all the way through San Jose.
Of course. And before you knew it, you were there for 12 years. Can you talk about what you were doing when you first got there and what your role looked like towards the end of your tenure there?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was the first M&A counsel. Back then, they were not very acquisitive, and I spent 12 years there. Since I joined, Salesforce has become one of the most acquisitive companies on earth, right? I worked on over 80 acquisitions and over 200 investments and other strategic transactions during my time there. When I first joined as part of the small team, we had less than 30 attorneys back then at Salesforce. I was able to get hands-on experience on a variety of issues beyond just M&A, right? I have a particular, fondness for people who do M&A, because M&A attorneys typically are these jack of all trades. So you can be two kinds of M&A attorneys. You can be the M&A attorney who is essentially a project manager who pass things around without looking into them yourself. I fortunately have the experience of, I actually was in the position that I have to look at all these things myself, like including IP issues, privacy issues, employment issues, and commercial contract issues, just because of the small team. So I was very fortunate that I was able to do that. And then by the end of my tenure there, I had almost a 20-person team who is in charge of our entire strategic transaction portfolios that ranges from acquisitions, investments, real estate, M&A integration, which is a hodgepodge of everything happening in the acquired company. And then at the latter stage of my career there, I started switching my focus from learning, picking up these legal skills, right, privacy, IP, to more learning about leadership, right? How do you motivate the team? How do you set a vision? How do you innovate? How do you scale? And all of those things. And that was the first time, I have to say, I started thinking about beyond, being a lawyer could be something that goes beyond just legal issues.
Great. And so it sounded like you had to build your 20-person team from scratch over the years that you were at Salesforce.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
And what did you look for as you were hiring attorneys for your team?
And Lena, this is the $1,000,000 question, right? How do you attract the best talent, and how do you retain and train the best talent? That start from hiring the right people. Hiring the right people who has the right mentality is first and foremost. We were looking for someone who is eager and who is eager to learn. Who has the learning mentality that I think is super important. And then the other thing that I was just talking with one of my prior managers who is also my mentor, that he had this, when I first applied for a job, I had to go through this technical interview where you do a test of different questions, and then they meet with you to talk through those questions. He swear that that was the secret of finding the right talent. And I have to say, I have been having a lot of great success with that myself as well.
It's great to hear that your experience from Salesforce when hiring is still applicable today. And you also mentioned that towards the end of your time there, you started to learn more about leadership. Were those how did those opportunities come about? Was that just over time as you became more senior and you had more exposure to the board and the executive team, or did you really have to speak up and fight for those opportunities to learn more about the business and to get more leadership opportunities?
That's such a good question, Lena. First of all, like when I first had those opportunities presented to me, those opportunities are every day around us. They're everywhere, right? It's just for the longest time, I didn't think that I needed it. I thought that being a lawyer is all about like, driving legal and business decisions. I didn't realize actually, leadership skills and, communication skills were so important to us. This also attributes back to my Chinese roots where, like both of my parents were engineers, and they just, do not have a lot of respect for those cadres that, who are not technical and yet wants to manage them because they were just part of the Communist Party. So, like I have to say, like just me trying to understand that, what our leadership is something that I need to learn itself took a long time. But the first, leadership opportunity where I actually actively sought, right? I went to, on my own, was the leadership in law from Berkeley. And this great, lecturer who talked about, these theories behind complex organizations, what's get inputted is actually not what gets outputted because of the human interaction and the different complex factors. There's all sorts of biases in human perception. Just putting it at a very academic level, and then that just speaks to me, right? I'm a very intellectually curious person, and I love to read a lot of things. And so, and I also went in to that seminar, to that training with a burning problem I wanted to solve in the first place. And I can talk a little bit about this on the Atticus project. And that just sparks, all of the learning from that point on.
And was that around the time you knew that you wanted to become a GC, or when did you know that you wanted to become a general counsel?
Yeah, I have to say, like Lena, I guess I don't know if I wanted to be a general counsel even today. Like what drives me on a day-to-day basis is I wanted to learn, and I wanted to have impact on have positive impact and contribution to the society around us. I know that sounds like really hollow and sounds like something that goes beyond me, but that's a genuine desire that I have currently. It could be a GC job, it could be a business job, it could be an entrepreneur job, it could be like anything, right? So I'm not particularly tied to the GC role, and that's also something that I know. If I say, hey, I wanted to be a GC, it's probably part of following the herd, hey, because every lawyer wants to be a GC. But then once you get here, you continue to ask the question of like, why am I here? What am I doing? What inspires me every single day? And that question will linger, will continue to linger after you become a GC.
I don't think I've ever heard someone respond with I don't know if I want to be a GC even now, but I have heard of many GCs have shared similar sentiments, and that they weren't necessarily looking to be one. They were just very service oriented or client oriented or mission driven, and that goal just happens to align very well with becoming a general counsel. So what led you to Infoblox?
Yeah, I have to say, like, I have also heard of a lot of people saying that, oh, I didn't want to be a GC, and somehow the GC title just fall on my head. And I'm always very jealous of those people because I wanted to be, I have to say I wanted to be a GC, right? Because pinnacle of being an attorney is to be a GC, but I just didn't know why. So when you asked me the question of like, when do you know that you wanted to be a GC? Like, I just didn't know. I wanted to be a GC because that's what everybody else wanted, and I just don't know, right? Why? But now I know it's not like I wanted to be a GC. It's just I have that burning passion of solving problems that can make a positive contribution to the world. And that's one of the things that, I have to say, like, that prevent me from getting a GC job for the longest period of time. And then as soon as that my mindset gets switched into that, hey, it's not about me, it's not about getting a GC position, it's about having the passion, having the energy of trying to solve a problem, and having the experience of tackling all sorts of different obstacles in order to get to that problem. That I have to say, like, it's that mentality that ended up getting me the GC job.
That makes sense on a lot of levels. And when you were looking for GC roles, what were some of the obstacles that you had faced while you were interviewing?
Yeah, it's a lot, right? I can tell you all of these obstacles that everyone probably recited back to all the people that, who haven't got a GC job yet. It's like, oh, you have never been a GC. Or you don't have the relevant experience, because we were looking for someone who has done IPO, and yet you haven't done IPO. We were looking for someone who has litigation experience. You have never done litigation. It's like, we're looking for someone who has management experience, and you don't have management experience. So it's a lot of those, and I just couldn't overcome that, right? For a longest period of time. But then, after I got this GC job, so after I had that mindset switch of like, hey, Atticus project is trying to solve a problem that is facing the entire legal department, and I have spent, probably like 2 years trying to solve that problem, overcome a lot of obstacles, trying to be a business partner to my Salesforce business clients. As soon as I made that business change, all of those obstacles fell away. Like, people don't, now I kind of almost felt like those were just excuses mm-hmm. of turning away candidates that they don't believe have the passion, have the energy, have the learning curiosity of or the grit of like trying to get a GC job. And I have to tell you, like, when my old colleagues now reach out to me, the first question is like, hey, how does it feel to be a GC? And I have to say, like, my first response is, you don't pay me enough to do this. Right? It's so hard. It's so hard. And the responsibilities is huge. And yet I don't regret any second of making this jump.
What are some aspects about being a GC that surprised you?
Yeah. When I was not a GC, I was jumping at the bed for like, let me make that decision. Let me advise you, on the risk of this. I think this things should be done this way, and why didn't you like let me, like make that decision? What surprised me is actually, now I feel the tremendous amount of responsibility and the burden on my shoulder in making a decision that impacts the business and people's lives, right? Because I have a different perspective than some of the GCs, in terms of a GC role. So one of my philosophy is, when it comes to risk management or mitigation, the buck stops with me. What does that mean? It's not just my role to tell the CEO that here are the risks I see, in terms of that legal issue or a business issue. I need to balance both the risks, of a business decision and the benefit. And then I need to make a risk assessment of saying that, hey, this is okay or not okay. And if it's not okay, what is the mitigation, that I can I can put in place in order to manage the risk. So, you know, in the old days, I always felt like, okay, yeah, like, you know, I can advise the risk on the risk, and I explain it in a very plain English way the business people understand. And now I can just sit back and not be responsible. But now, like, you know, the burden of making that decision, and then if that decision goes wrong, I'm accountable, and then I have to come up with ways to fix it. That burden is pretty heavy.
Exactly. And that's why the GC role isn't for everyone. And I'm sure many people think that they can do it. But like, as you said, that responsibility is extremely heavy. How has it been like to work for a PE-backed company as vis-a-vis a public company like Salesforce?
I have to say, like, you know, I don't know, is it because Infoblox is the exception, because Infoblox was a public company, you know, 8 years ago. But I don't see that much of a difference, you know, in terms of rigor, in terms of the desire for process, procedures, in terms of the ability to, you know, to balance the need for speed and agility in innovation, and the need for risk management, because we deal with, you know, the largest of the customers, enterprise customers, ranging from governments to banks to, you know, financial institutions, so healthcare. So I don't see that much of a difference. So of course, like, you know, there's no there's less scrutiny in terms of the financial reporting side of the house. But you know, the need for profitability, the need for efficiency, the need for margins is not that different, especially in this new economy.
Yeah, that's interesting to hear. And it does seem like nowadays, with the economy being where it is, what it is, both public and private companies are kind of rowing in the same direction, in the sense that everybody's facing very, very similar headwinds. You mentioned the Atticus Project a couple of times. I know it is a labor of love. So can you tell listeners what that organization is and how it came about?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Atticus Project is a nonprofit organization I founded 3 years ago, just to try to solve my own problem, right? You know, so I was an M&A attorney by training. I spent countless hours doing due diligence, where you review thousands of contracts just to find the needle in the haystack, you know, a couple of problematic provisions. And then, you know, I haven't had to do that for a long time. Now I become a senior, you know, attorney, but there's still a lot of people who are doing that. And then as a client, that, you know, that's kind of, you know, the expensive part of doing a deal, where you kind of, you know, balance the pros and cons of like whether it's worth the money. So one of the ways that I was thinking about making that process more accessible to, you know, big companies or small companies alike is to leverage AI, right? Leverage AI to be able to understand these contracts, and, you know, with a click of a button, maybe like you can have some of these problematic clauses presented to you, and then, you know, you can have the human coming in and then do the analysis and do the strategic advising. So with the AI technology becoming a little bit more mature, this was like 3 years ago, I had the illusion that there are AI legal companies who can help me with that problem, but it turned out that they couldn't. And the reason why they couldn't is because of the lack of training data set. So now that's a very well-known issue. You know, data is the new air or the new oil, or, you know, everybody knows the importance of data. And so that's when I started, you know, coming up with this solution of, hey, if we gather, you know, the legal professionals, try to label these these contracts, and essentially tell the AI that, you know, what part of this contract actually is important, is problematic, then the AI would know, and then the AI would be able to, you know, like understand legal text. All of that has been fundamentally challenged, and I have to say, like, in the past 3 months since I got my hands on ChatGPT, And I have to say, like, from my, from the Atlas project perspective, we're having an existential crisis, right? Like before, our goal was to create these training data set to increase the AI's ability to understand legal text. But it turned out that, GPT-4 is so good, it may or may not even need these training data sets anymore. So we're doing a complete pivoting. We're having our volunteers stop labeling all of these contracts. Instead, they're doing prompt engineering. We're still trying to figure it out. That this whole generative AI development put everybody in the stage where you just don't know what to do, from this point on.
That's wild. And I have heard that for some experts have made an analogy that AGI is almost the equivalent of when man discovered fire. And so how are you utilizing AI, if at all, in your legal department? I know that a lot of GCs are kind of trying to wrap their heads around corporate policy on AI use, whether or not they should allow employees or attorneys to use it. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I use ChatGPT every single day. I use it for a variety of different purposes, and I use it to do research. For example, today there was a question about patent continuation. I'm not a patent attorney. I have no idea, right? So I use ChatGPT to do some of the questioning, and then I got the keywords from these answers, and I do an online search to find a more reputable source for that. I find that to be very helpful. I asked ChatGPT to draft me a patent continuation FAQ so I can educate my engineering team, and then I cross-check that with the law firm publications. I find that to be very helpful as well. I'm also experimenting with using a GPT-4 API to summarize issues in the red line, and also creating a chatbot, answering some routine legal questions. So all of this is still in the lab stage, but I'm super excited, about what's coming down the pipe in the next 6 months to 12 months. That being said, only if you start using this, you'll understand that, what are the potential risks and how do you put together a best practice to mitigate those risks. For example, I just I just had a call right before this podcast to discuss hey, what are the guardrails that we can put in place in order to prevent the developers from potentially running into IP issues by using ChatGPT to code, right? We all know that, if we prevent that, if we just say you are prohibited from doing that, people will do it. They will do it. They will do it, undercover, and it's going to be worse, right? So having a clear path to figure out a way based on your company's risk profile is very important. You just can't turn a blind eye thinking that, if you prohibit it, if you have a policy, your job is done.
That's great advice, because AGI is here to stay, and we all have to learn how to use it and utilize it and run towards it as opposed to away from it. And given all the obstacles that you have faced in becoming a general counsel, what advice do you have for aspiring GCs?
Yeah, I'm gonna steal this advice from one of the CEOs of a startup, and he said, hey, in terms of there's what you value and then how you show up, right? If you can bridge the gap between what you value versus how you show up on a day-to-day basis, your life will be filled with purpose and mission and joy and satisfaction. It doesn't matter how many hours that you work on a daily basis and whatnot, so I would say yes, aspiring GCs, you know, yes, like being a GC is a admirable goal, but that can't be the goal. Nobody is born to say, hey, I value for being a GC, because GCs and GCs, they're very different. So you need to really think about what you value. For me, what I value is making making like coming up with a solution to solve a problem that is going to have an impact on the legal society. At one point, I even had this illusion of like, hey, the legal services is so inefficient, and like it's my job, to help, improve that. And then how you show up every day, right? Like if I have to be a GC where I can't do anything, all I do is to operate around a consent decree, from the FTC, like, trying to maneuver all these like very complicated risk management issues, or like trying to like do a litigation that is not gonna, result in the company, large amount of damages. That would not be the kind of activity that would give me joy, right? So the kind of activity that will give me joy is being able to sit at the executive table, understand marketing issues, marketing challenges, sales challenges, finance challenges, and being able to think creatively of coming up with a way to move the business forward, not only from a legal perspective, but also from a business perspective. That's what I enjoy. And so I was able to bridge that gap, in my current job by just constantly thinking about, I'm learning today on these things that I didn't know. And I challenge myself to come up with a solution that is gonna solve that.
It sounds like your advice really kind of ties back to what you were saying earlier about just having a passion or being very mission driven in whatever you do, and perhaps that will lead people ultimately to the GC role. And for women and women of color who want to be a leader in house, I think we run up against that likability factor, which is also a double-edged sword.
Have you had experience with being viewed as likable, but just another worker bee? Or on the flip side, which is you have opinions and ideas, but you're considered too aggressive?
Yeah, Lena, this is where I'm smiling when I hear this question, because I had encountered both. At my some of my earlier career, there's this impression that hey, you're not being aggressive, you're not like advocating and all of that. And then but then at when I went in-house, it's almost like you're being too aggressive and you're not like you were perceived as not collegial. I have to say, like, you just can't you can't let any of those tie you down to become someone that who you're not. This is authenticity is really important to you, because I think that most people decided to leave their career because they couldn't be authentic, and then they just had to show up differently from how they value themselves and what they value. And over time, that not being able to be your authentic self is very tiring, and you just felt like you misconstrue that as you not liking the job. So I would say that one enlightening moment for me was during one of the seminars for negotiation. Someone basically told us that there's no right or wrong answer. You could be a very effective negotiator if you're aggressive, or if you can be a very good negotiator if you're collaborative. You just need to be mindful of like who you are, what's your strength, and then you have other toolkits in your you have other tools in your toolkit that you can leverage either from yourself or from somebody else that you'll hire, right? So that advice was very enlightening to me, because it's based on this assumption that you are enough, right? I think people always have this misconception that they need to change. They need to change because they were either too aggressive or too nice or too, something. And I think that we just need to eliminate that. If you genuinely care about the people around you, and if you genuinely are passionate about pursuing, your end goal, eventually you'll be accepted not by everyone. The goal is never to be accepted or liked by everyone, but it's just, accepted by those people who truly see who you are and then are able to accept you.
What a liberating attitude that is. And it's great that you, as a leader, embody that mentality so that members of your team can feel empowered. There have been so many ups and downs this past year. Have the changes in the market shifted your priorities and focus at all as a GC?
I mean, the year of 2023 is going to be the year of AI, as we all know it, right? And AI is going to challenge our ability to be more effective, be more efficient, scale, do more with less. And this has been the top priority for almost all GCs across the board. And now, generative AI is just brings this to the forefront of everything that we do. So you will see a lot of changes in the coming days about how the legal industry needs to evolve itself, and how we need to shape the perception that legal is just is a box. You have this prejudice against lawyers for being a risk adverse. As soon as you started talking with a lawyer, things slow down, and then you just nothing gets done. I think there's a general misconception, general prejudice against lawyers in the industry, and I hope that I can do something to change that. Every lawyer needs to be a business person as well, right? Like helping your company to succeed from a business perspective is everybody's job, and it's the GC's job as well. And it requires you to identify not only do the risk management, but also identify ways that you can increase productivity, you can effectively manage risk, and then you can effectively move the business forward.
Sounds like a lot going on your plate between your day job and the Atticus project and everything that's going on in the AI world. There must be a lot on your mind. So what do you do to decompress at the end of the day?
Yeah, long distance running and hiking with my family. I prioritize running over everything else, right? If I don't do that, I can't, keep my sanity. And also, when I run, I listen to these entrepreneurial stories about, how other people try to solve their difficult problems. And I have to tell you, so many things, so many good ideas that came about, during those long runs. So, it doesn't need to be a run. I just set aside that half an hour or even 15 minutes every single day to do things that you really enjoy. Is definitely worthwhile.
It sounds like it's a great way for your brain to just disconnect from everything so that you have space to think these big thoughts and to be able to really think clearly about some of the challenges, and so you're able to problem solve. Well, Wei, I thank you so much for your time. It's been really great chatting with you and getting the opportunity to ask you all of these questions and hear about your journey. I know that becoming general counsel is just the beginning, and you still have such a long runway ahead of you, and I look forward to supporting you in your journey.
Thanks so much for listening to GC's in the House. I hope you enjoyed this episode and will join me next time for an in-depth discussion with another general counsel. I welcome your feedback and recommendations for guests. You can reach me at lguo@mlaglobal.com. Please also reach out if you have any questions or comments about today's episode. Until next time.